we got one.
This Three Beards Media podcast may contain mature themes, and if you're not down with that, we got 3 words for you. Like the podcast. Nailed it!
Evening, everybody. This is Fall Starts with Bill Blank and Chris Shipley. I'm your host, Chris. Bill, how are you doing tonight?
Swell. How are you, sir?
Not too bad. Not too bad. It's a good thing that we're recording tonight. Yesterday might have been an epic episode. I was what I like to call BS Chris before Stacy. I was hot and angry and was ready to burn the whole fucking world down. So,
oh yeah, about
yeah.
about
family.
Really?
Yeah.
They made you that mad?
Yeah, there's some family dynamics going on, and one faction won't talk to the other faction, and I'm in the middle having to relay shit, and then people are bitching and whining, and I finally told all of them to be a fucking adult and shut.
Oh my god, dude! I
literally, I'm not kidding you. I had to be talked off the ledge because I was gonna burn everybody to the fucking ground yesterday. I had just gotten out of therapy. I had just had a 45-minute conversation with my therapist about the whole thing. And I left and I felt better. And within 5 minutes, I had a text message and I lost my fucking mind again.
But I bet you your therapist would have probably applauded you if you just fucking cussed everybody out.
Yeah, he was like, sometimes you
got to set the boundary, you
got to set the boundary.
Yeah.
But, the other part of it was the day before, Stacy, I about went scorched earth on Sunday, and I waited until Stacy got home, and I explained to her the situation, and she was like, listen, you just need to treat this like an administrator at school, like my administrator would at school when you're sending a note back to a parent. You don't put any kind of emotion into it. Drop the facts into the group chat and then let it go and let it and let
let go of the results.
Right. And I did, and I felt better. But unfortunately Stacy wasn't around yesterday afternoon. So
yeah, it's funny. I have a similar situation in 2 different ways. My 2 best friends are brothers, and neither one of them talks to their mom, and neither one of them talks to each other.
Yeah.
And I'm the only one that talks to all 3 of them.
Yeah.
And so I get fucked because if I want to do anything, or like if there's anything happening where I want all 3 of them to be there, or, anything like that.
Right.
I can't have all 3 ever.
Right.
So that's unfair to me.
Right.
And then there's the fact that, I've also got 2 of my other friends that are like, we've all been best friends for 30 plus years.
Right.
2 of them aren't talking to each other and like have basically broken up.
Right.
And so now I can't have the 2 of them at the same time.
Right.
It's like selfishly it's ruined a whole bunch of my shit.
I'm okay that I don't have to be around all of them all at once. The dichotomy of it is that my mother is being taken care of by all of us in some form or fashion, and one has a question about something that that one of the other ones knows, but she won't talk to the other one. So then she asks me, and then I got to get the answer, and I may not have the right answer right away. And I'm like, listen, if you just were a fucking adult and you could text the person real quick and ask them,
right,
then we wouldn't have this fucking clusterfuck. So I'm done doing that. I'm fucking done relaying messages.
Text messaging can also do that.
You're all 8 and 12 years older than I am. You should be much more mature.
Right.
So I don't know what to tell you. But,
no, I mean, text messaging can ruin communication in a way. It
Yeah.
it can really ruin tone, and people can pick things up.
Well, nobody had
And
any
just
trouble.
make things up. You know what I mean?
Nobody had any trouble getting my tone yesterday. I made it quite fucking clear. So, all right.
Right on.
Nobody tuned in to hear about me.
No. Yeah, you had a good weekend though. The clones pulled off a miracle and won a game. And
Nice. You know what? Listen, I know you don't know anything about Jack
You're
Trice,
right.
and you call it the picket fence.
Oh yeah, that's not to
symbol.
make fun of Jack Trice.
No,
That's
I
not,
know that. I know that. But
that's just because it makes me laugh when people take things that everybody had
right.
and apply it to something. Like every single person in that era wore that same exact jersey. They all looked like that.
Yeah, they did.
And so they put that thing on like that's Jack Trice. Like, no, did he have a number or something? Can't you do something?
Yeah, he was 37.
But at the same time, in a way, I think Iowa. I'm correct. I may be wrong about this, but I feel like there's been times at least where Iowa has made the leather helmet about Niall Kinnick or something.
Yeah, right.
I feel like maybe I feel like I've seen that.
Yeah,
so.
as a logo or whatever.
Yeah.
But the whole
anyway.
For me, just it was the 100-year anniversary for Jack Trice's death, and the university and the city and Iowa State Athletics did a wonderful job of recognizing all that. And honestly, it was probably the best game day experience that I've had in Ames since I've been going. It was
awesome.
that good. It was that good. So
that's awesome. Good for you.
And we stuck it to TCU, who I fucking hate anyway. So
yeah, I kind of hate everybody. I don't really anybody we play. I don't really have any.
Well,
I was kind of like there's certain people I like. Like I actually like Tom Izzo, and I actually like I always kind of liked Pat Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
And, like there's some people I just kind of like or whatever, but yeah, outside of that, and then I get to hear shit. My favorite thing is all the Iowa State fans making fun of Iowa's offense last week when you guys scored 27. It's like, oh, what a fucking juggernaut! You scored 7 more points. We had fucking 20. We don't miss 2 field goals. We have 26. Like, shut the fuck up. But anyway,
that's a whole nother pod.
Yeah, we'll let's get going here. Our guest tonight is a really good friend of mine, a comic who's he's a lot more versatile than just a comic, and he's kind of going in another direction for the most part these days. But we became friends as comics, and we've done actually several podcasts together at different times. And we've hung out a lot, and I have a lot of love and admiration for our guest, Michael Malone. Welcome, Michael.
Hey,
how are you?
How are you guys? Wonderful.
Yeah, Michael, thank you so much for hopping on. It'll be a pleasure to get to know you. And I did listen to a little bit of that one of the podcasts that you guys did a couple years ago.
Oh, nice.
So it was really nice. So
yeah,
thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, Bill was like one of the first people I had on Punched Up the series, and it turned out great, and yeah, I loved his episode.
That was so well done. You were so it was so NPR-ish, like the way that the storytelling, like, and that actually, I don't know if you ever saw, I did a storytellers project thing that was kind of like The Moth, but it was local.
Okay.
And I've shared it several times over the years, but that podcast was kind of helped with that a little bit because it was such a step away from stand-up. Like, it was funny. We had laughs.
Right.
But there was a lesson there, and it was a story. And it also helped give me the idea for this podcast because that episode was, about kind of anxiety and how that's played a part in my life ever since I was a kid.
Yeah, I think a lot of times those storytellings get a kind of a negative tone to them, but you can be funny. It's funny and then more, Oftentimes The Moth has really hilarious stories on there. But you wouldn't think about that because you just think about the sad stories you hear or the heart-wrenching ones. But that's what I loved about Punched Up as well, doing that series, was because it took stand-ups out of their element a little bit, and you still got to be funny. You know, all these stories were unique in their own way, but it was just that. It was focusing on one story and then bringing it to life with music and sound effects and narration and all that stuff. But it was a really fun series, and I'm trying to. I've always wanted to do more of those, and so I'm still trying to do that. It's a lot for just me to
Well,
work on.
it probably took, I don't know, 4 hours of production after the fact, at least.
Oh yeah,
If not more.
you're talking a couple of weeks of production, and then you have to formulate the narration and all those things, and then you know, it's just me picking out all the music and sometimes making some of the music, and again, like writing the narratives and putting everything together and editing and all that stuff. It was a lot to take on. I loved it,
Yeah.
but it's a lot for one person.
So how did you I remember the episode I did, I remember all the music. I distinctly remember the music. Like we're getting into like me talking at the story, just do. And then and then I start talking a little more about anxiety or like death or whatever. And then it's boom, boom, you know. So did you, when you were editing, were you like, okay, did you just type in like happy story music into a search engine?
Yeah, you really do. There's a few libraries out there that have kind of like the background music available, and so it's hours of searching through libraries of stuff. One of my favorite ones was Kelsey Cook did one, and it was all about meeting John Mayer, and she had a big crush on John Mayer, and so she's in the same hotel as John because she's at this like comedy festival, and John Mayer just happens to be there. And she's with Jim Norton because she was opening for him at the time. And they meet John Mayer the night before, and then she stays up all night thinking to herself, how can I bump into him, you know, like naturally. and so the story follows along, and then eventually it goes to the next morning, and she's like, I have to see him again. And she's telling Jim about this, and Jim's kind of teasing her and this and that. And then they go upstairs real quick or something. And when they come back down, Jim's like, all right, I'm going to see if I can pull some strings and get you to meet John. And then they go to ask the hotel clerk and this and that, and some friends they bump into. And they find out that when they went upstairs, John came downstairs and left. And they had waited for so long to be there. And she was like in the little breakfast area. She was hanging out. And just in that instance where they went upstairs, he came downstairs, and she was heartbroken. And one of my favorite elements in that was I found the sound effects for a thunderstorm rolling in. and then when she's talking about being heartbroken about missing John, she's like fake crying on the episode, and so I have all this pouring rain. It adds so much to that little piece of the story. But that was one of my favorites. You just hear like this thunder and lightning kind of roll in as she's getting sadder, and then when she's fake crying, you just hear this heavy rain pour, and she's talking about how heartbroken she was. And yeah, I love putting all that together.
When Bill came to me and wanted to do this podcast, he had some ideas of what he wanted to accomplish and why. With your series Punched Up, what motivated you to want to do that and begin that process?
I loved hearing podcasts like This American Life and Radio Lab, S-Town, Serial, stuff like that really brings, again, these interviews or these stories to life. And I just didn't think anybody was doing that for comedians. You hear that again, like The Moth is a great series, but there's no added music or sound effects or anything like that. And they're great storytellers. And I had that revelation of like, what if you combine those two worlds? What if This American Life and Radio Lab, shows like that, we're focusing on these great storytellers that are comedians. I don't think in the arts anybody is better than a comic. I'll put a comic up against any dramatic actor, any storyteller, any comedic actor, anybody in the arts. You throw a comic in, we're gonna swim. And I and
I agree. I agree with that. But go ahead.
Yeah, and I just thought that those two worlds would just mesh so well together, and nobody was really doing that. And this was also a time where like Mark Maron was really blowing up, and his interviews with comics were so interesting and so enlightening. And I was like, oh, well, this seems like a no-brainer. What if the people who were, you listen to Joe Rogan for 5 hours to hear Bill Burr talk about his father that was mean to him for 6 minutes. Yeah. Like, what if you just shined a light on that 6 minutes of that really heartbreaking story about Bill and his father, and you made it sound like This American Life or Radio Lab? Like that was kind of the birth of that idea, was what if we just take these two great things and put them together to make hopefully something else that's great.
Yeah, I like that. It's and also like the expansion of it. You know what I mean? Like you're not just in this place where you're focused on that one thing.
Right.
You are focused on that one thing, but you're giving that one thing that much more life than just that run of the mill, simple, I got to make sure that I keep this about me in a way. Like Joe Rogan still has to make sure the show's about him.
Right.
Yeah.
And you with Punched Up, it was so far from being about you ever. Like you chimed in for 2 seconds a couple of times.
Yeah, I really tried to just make it their story, and I was acting just as a guide. I was almost acting as the audience,
Yeah.
I was just kind of like, because I was hearing this story for the first time. And so a lot of the times you would just kind of hear reactions from me. And then every once in a while I would just kind of fill in here and there, or connect a story or something like that. But it was never did I ever come on there and make jokes or like interrupt or do any of that. You never hear me do that.
No, absolutely not.
And I don't know if that was on purpose or not. It was just how it came together. I just didn't feel like it was about me.
And that's that's what's surprising, because we're not good at that as comics. Like inherently, we're not good at sharing. I mean, that's why most of us can't do the improv group, or we actually can't stand the improv groups.
That's what I was just going to compare it to.
We can't share.
Yep, I did years of improv, and that's the main thing that you learn. You learn 2 things, and that's building and listening.
Yes.
And that was the 2 things that now I'm thinking about it. Those are the 2 major things that made Punched Up work. I was building these stories and setting them up so other people look good, and I was listening. And those are the 2 things you get taught the most in improv. And stand-ups doing improv is so hard because we are so trained to be like, it's me, punch, 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 punch.
Yeah.
And improv,
we're not good teammates.
No, and it's build, punch, build, punch. And a lot of stand-ups can't figure that out.
I mean, we're the best teammates in every, like, if we're out of our element, we're great teammates.
Yes.
Like, we're the best on a movie set. We're great on a movie set.
Right.
But we're not great when the idea is to be funny and there's other people there at the same time. Like, no, it's like what Dave Chappelle said. Somebody else is fucking my girl right now and I can do it better. Like, it's just not. It's one thing to sit there and watch other comics perform before you or after you. It's yet another to be on the stage at the same time. Like, you're not bouncing shit off each other unless that's the idea. You're all up there on stools roasting each other. That's completely different than first line, last line.
Yeah, you have to be really comfortable with yourself, and I think that's also the other element that came into it was, and this is something that I applied to just stand up later in my life, was that idea of killing versus connecting, which I talk about a lot. And I think that's the difference in Punched Up as well, where you're taking a story that normally a stand-up would take on stage and kill with, and think about the beats and kill, punch, punch, punch. And now we're slowing it down and we're finding heart and we're finding different avenues and we're telling, we're really building the story out. So we're connecting with the audience. And that's something that I applied to my stand-up later, was that idea of going from kill, kill, kill to connecting with an audience. And again, that's not easy to do as a stand-up because we're trained to just fucking murder up there.
Yeah.
But I think Chris Rock said it as well. He said anybody can kill. Open micers kill. And Patrice talked about you learn how to kill, and that's fine, and then you learn how to do comedy, and that's what it really is. It's connecting with an audience and making them actually feel something. And I think that's a big thing that not a lot of people are doing.
It's weird too, because I felt like I had just kind of gotten there right around COVID, right before COVID. I was just starting to get there where, I mean, I knew I was just more off. I was going on stage more often with the intent of experimenting, with the intent of having fun.
Yeah.
But that fun not being about the laughs.
Mm-hmm.
And like worrying about trying different things, worrying about taking risks more than killing, because at some point we all got that in our back pocket.
Right.
And
yeah, anybody can kill.
Yeah. And I think where the hard part is when you can go ahead, because you have to get comfortable with eating a dick at first. And then you kill and you don't eat a dick anymore, and you never want to eat it. You never want to feel like that again.
Right.
And then there's this whole new level of freedom that happens when you're like, I'm going to go eat a dick on purpose tonight.
Yeah, you're finding it. And that's where all the best stuff is in that uncomfortability. That's where you're going to find the fucking gold, man.
It's so I went to this open mic. I never went to open mics in Des Moines because I felt like they did me no good.
Right.
Like I started out and got my chops and all that, but once I could go to the Funny Bone whenever I wanted, why would I go perform in front of a bunch of comics when I can have an audience that I can gauge my shit off of?
Yeah.
Because that's the reality. You don't want to gauge your jokes off of other comics. You'll never get a laugh.
Oh, you're talking to a guy who lives in LA.
Yeah. Exactly. And so I would never go. Well, a friend of mine, do you know Johnny Bush? Do you know Bush?
I've heard you talk about him. I don't think I've ever met him.
Okay, so John he was working on something. And so he asked a bunch of us to go down and watch him and give him notes, right? Well, he's drunk when he gets there and signs us all up without telling us. And so I go on stage and I have nothing. And I just start talking about all the shit I was going, my divorce. I was like, and I was talking, it was mostly comics, so I was like, you guys, I mean, here's the thing. You can, if you just commit right now, like if you commit right now and give everything you got right now, like 20 years from now, you can be 45, divorced twice, and not have any idea who the fuck you are anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
And of course, it's just doom and gloom in the room, nothing's happening. And I get off stage and Dwayne Clark, who you probably have met, who I'm sure has emceed a show or two at the Bone when you were there.
Yeah.
Dwayne was there and he was like, that was the best set of the night. He was like, it was raw. He goes, that's what you should be doing all the time. I'm like, I don't think I could do that all the time, Dwayne.
No.
I don't think I'd ever work. I don't think anybody would pay me if I did that all the time.
Sometimes it is magic in the bottle.
Yeah.
Some nights I remember I riffed. I came back out of COVID and I was setting up shows and I was doing one in Indianapolis at this little theater and then one in Columbus. And 2 nights in a row, I go to Indianapolis. I riff for like the first 10 or 15 minutes about the plane ride there that I'd witnessed for the first time, somebody getting kicked off an airplane. And I had never seen that, and they were like being rowdy, and it was like a whole thing. And so I just kind of like riffed the story. It crushed in Indianapolis. I go to Columbus the very next night. I do the same story, but I'm like trying to put it together because you don't write it down.
The night before,
It was completely
it's
off the
there.
cuff. Right.
Yeah,
You don't-
exactly.
Well, now you didn't have the lack of confidence in not knowing what you were going to say the first time.
Right.
It's that energy,
Yeah.
and that excitement and all those things that plow us through. And so the second night it fucking bombs so hard. And in my head,
you didn't work on it in between.
right? No.
Yeah. I was like, I'll just go tell that story again.
Exactly.
No idea what you said when that got the laughs or anything. You didn't
No
fucking dissect
timing.
it.
No,
at
because
all.
it was so
Yeah.
organic the first
Yeah.
time. It was completely organic.
So some nights you have that magic
Yeah.
in a bottle, and you're like, "Oh fuck yeah!" And then the next night you're like, "Oh wait a minute, I should."
So
go
let me
back to the
ask.
written stuff.
Let me ask, as somebody that's obviously not a comic, and
Yeah.
and as my kids will say, not funny. So, when you talk about the difference between build, and then punch and kill, you're talking about just literally you're doing your bits. You're leading on a story that is leading to a joke. Whereas
Right.
opposed, what you're talking about now is you're telling more of a story and bringing them closer into something real, right? And then
Yeah.
mixing in some comedy to lighten the mood. But your goal there is probably more to tell a story, not necessarily get a laugh. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, think of it like breadcrumbs. So I'm giving them a treat every once in a while. You give them a laugh. You can't go 15 minutes without punches. You know what I
Sure,
mean?
right.
You just can't. You're going to bore the audience. So every once in a while, you have to reward them for listening to keep their attention. So you'll give them a one-liner. Am I lying? It's like you're training a dog. You literally are training an audience because they don't know.
It's like when I let my dog, I give him a treat after he comes back inside.
Do you know Ryan Stout?
Yeah, oh yeah, love Ryan.
So, like Ryan will addresses the crowd as crowd.
Yeah,
Just,
yeah,
that's what that reminds me of right there. That attitude of like, okay, crowd,
yeah.
here you go,
There you go.
here you go, crowd. Okay, now come on.
Yeah, but you have to because they are in free fall.
Yeah,
They have no idea where you're going. You do.
Right.
You know exactly when the next punch is coming, all that. So in your head, you're like, if I can just make it to here, then we're good.
Okay.
And so that's the building, is being like, if I can make it to here, then I can make it to here. Then I can. So you're slowly leading them along, treat by treat. And then that way you're able to actually say something meaningful without losing their attention, without them getting angry or heckling or wanting to interject or getting bored or any of these things. Because again, they are blind. They have no idea where you're going with anything.
Right.
And that is comedy. It's always surprise, right? If comedy was predictable, nobody would fucking go see it.
Yeah.
So when the storytelling comes in, it's just longer surprises. And so we have to just keep their attention longer. And so, yeah, the building is where you're just kind of laying out the treats along the way instead of just treat.
Right.
Well,
And you're like,
the comedy in this instance, the comedy's for levity.
right.
It's
right,
just
yeah.
Like the thing I did, the storytellers thing I did, I believe it was about 13 minutes long, right?
Yeah.
Started out with a whole bunch of funny.
Yeah.
Like,
I
but
do
then the
remember
lesson came, and then which I had a lot of help making it into that. But
and as a side note, if people have not seen that was really good. And I Bill, I don't know that I've ever told you this, but the first time that I watched that was a couple days after I had gotten diagnosed with cancer, was sitting in the hospital room.
oh, really?
I was the first time that you had, I can't remember if you had sent it to me or if you had posted something or somebody had sent it to me because they knew
I probably
knew
posted it right when it came. I mean, when it
And,
came out, I posted it.
I watched that and it was so profound to watch, especially at a time where I was struggling with some things that it was the right time to hear that story. So, I'll see if I can find the link, and when we post this audio, I'll post it in the link because if it's still out there online, I think it might be.
I think it's out there still, yeah, on YouTube.
So
yeah, it was, but it's weird how all this stuff. It all started with a fight I got into in first grade.
Yeah.
And ended up 30 years later being this profound lesson when I just reflected on all of it. Like, it was just weird how it all came together. But that's the point, though. There was a bunch of, all the comedy was for levity. And like, I remember the first time that I was hosting when you were at the club, and the first time you closed with all this heartfelt shit.
Yeah.
I'm saying shit like, oh, what the fuck was this? What the fuck is this, Michael? No, it was, but you're closing with all this heartfelt stuff, and I was waiting for a punchline. I was like, because I'm closing the show, I got to come up. I can't make you walk off the stage all weird. Like, I got to be there to shake your hand and all, So like, I'm on deck, like, waiting, and it's all beautiful, believe me. Like, I'm not saying this to make fun of what he was doing, but just the trained MC part of the show. And I'm just okay, and so I'm just waiting for all that to happen, and then you say some fucking completely asshole thing, that, and then it would just break the tension, and everybody fucking, and you're just, hey, good night. No, he tells all this shit is so, good night, everybody. And I'm like, motherfucker. I start running. Like, I went to the back of the room about 4 times because I thought he was going to close. And so finally, I'm just like, all right. And I go back there, and that's when he fucking,
It was so funny. The first few times I was working on, I think that was my first hour. I was working on that. And that was about my mother and losing my stepfather and my mom back to back, and talking about that experience and the grief and everything like that. And I had not done that a whole lot. I was kind of scared of that material when I first started doing it. And I remember I was back in Indianapolis, and I was doing Morty's. It used to be a great little club there, and it was my home club for a long time. And I was working with Rich Reagans. Do you know Rich?
No, I was a Crackers guy.
Okay, yeah.
I couldn't get out from under Ruth Ann.
Oh boy, sorry to hear that. So
anyway, yeah, Chris has no fucking.
I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
I'm literally at this point. I'm not even the host. I'm just a listener. I'm just a listener at this point.
There were two clubs in Indianapolis at the time. One was called Crackers. One was called Morty's.
Yeah.
And Crackers had 2 locations. Morty's had 1. It was basically a lateral move, but you couldn't work both of them. They hated each other. It happens a lot in the industry, but
yeah.
So I stuck with Crackers because I could work 2 clubs.
Right. I lived in Indianapolis for a while.
Yeah.
Morty's was like the first people to like give me feature work and all that stuff. So I was like, fucking Morty's for life, baby. So anyway, so I'm working with Rich, and Rich is a great guy. He's out of Kentucky. So funny, and I've known him forever, and he's killing. And he's a headliner, but he came to the club to hang out and kind of open for me. So we're having a great week, and then Saturday night we have a big sold out show, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do the big close tonight. And at the time I was just kind of like, I had done it maybe 3 or 4 times, and it's a 15 or 20 minute closer. And at that time I'd only done a handful, so I was still kind of finding it, still riffing it halfway, still discovering it. And so I do the big close, and Rich comes in the green room afterwards, and he goes, man, that was like watching somebody land a goddamn plane up there. And that made me feel so good.
Yeah, so you took it positively then?
Yeah.
I mean, that does sound positive, but still. Like,
yeah, it was so interesting, but yeah, and that's and then when I went to record the special, I had a weekend up in Skyline, and so I had to do that closer every night. Yeah. And it was the first time that I was kind of forced to do that closer every night. And so I did it 5 nights in a row. And let me tell you, doing that closer every night was draining, emotionally and mentally and all those things. And I remember one night I came off, it was Friday night late show, and I had riffed a piece of it that I had thought about before, but never said out loud. And it just broke me. I almost started crying on stage, kept it together, but then afterwards went straight to the green room, shut the door, and just like fucking lost it. And I remember that material being so heavy for me at that time. And so hard to even, I was so scared of it and didn't, because I knew what it was capable of. Because when I would do that, people would come up and share their stories. And that's the connection that I'm talking about. People would come up, we just lost our brother, my mother died, this happened, this happened.
So now you got to fucking hear all that shit all night? Like, why would you even put yourself through that?
It was honestly, it was such a better feeling than great show.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I get it. Well, it's therapeutic too.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're connecting on a way that I was like, oh, I didn't know that this is something that comedy could do.
Yeah.
And so then I got more comfortable with it. And I think when you saw me, I was pretty good with it and kind of numb to be honest.
Yeah, you've been through it enough. And that, I mean, was that a new fear though? Like once you got numb, was it not going to be as effective because the emotion, you were almost going to have to feign the emotion
I was scared
to get it over,
I was scared of what's next. That's what I was more afraid of, was like, once you do something like that and it is so different and it resonates so well with people, you go, fuck else can I do? Like that's the big thing. I've been doing comedy 20 years now. And it's like, if that's the big ta-da,
right?
Yeah.
What's the new what's left?
Yeah, it's almost it's almost a swan song of a closer.
Yeah, and you're like, all right. And so, the pandemic happened shortly after that. I think my special came out in like right before things closed down. I think it came out in November and things closed down in March. The special did really well, and then it was great. And then I had all of the pandemic to sit around and think about
and not
what's
be able
next.
to exploit it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, what a fucking mind fuck. But I mean, you got back at it. I mean, are you still performing at Brad Garrett's at all right now?
Yeah.
Is that just?
Yeah, I'm taking just a handful of clubs that I really like doing right now. I'm going to be back at Brad's for New Year's. So it's stuff like that I'm doing, but I'm not touring like I was, and I'm not doing any spots around town. I'm kind of like burnt out on that, and I've kind of shifted into I've kind of carved out a little niche with filming comedy specials now for other people. And kind of in the same way I was working on Punched Up, is I'm applying it to specials now. I just got back from, we did a month in
Ireland. Right?
Yeah, it was Scotland and London with Colin Moulton. We were shooting a documentary over there, finding about his family roots. And then we spent a week on a farm in Scotland building an hour of material that he was going to film in Scotland, in a country he'd never been in front of a crowd he has no idea what they expect or what they like, with material that wasn't written yet, with one chance to nail it. And we put 2 heartbeats in that thing that were like, and when I say heartbeats, those are the moments that like really bring the crowd down, connect, and then bring them back up again. Mm-hmm. So we had 2 of those in that show, and we built them all on a farm in Scotland. And we couldn't get guest spots. He didn't know anybody there. We couldn't do anything. So he couldn't run the hour. So he's literally, I have footage of him literally running material by the cows out in the prairie.
This is so fucking, everything you're saying to me right now is so Colin Moulton.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Like the dude, he's one of those guys that's just a comic. He just is.
Oh
like
man, he's a machine, dude.
he fucking I can't remember who he was working with. I don't know. There was one day that him and whoever was opening for him, they went to a fucking garage sale and just bought a bunch of shit, and they had to do the whole show involving all this shit they bought at the garage sale.
So Colin and I did that in Dayton. We went to
That was you
sale.
then that told
Yeah.
me that story.
Yeah, this
Perfect.
is back in the day. Yeah, we went back and bought a bunch. We went garage sailing, and then on that show that night, we did the show, and then we went in the green room and had the MC stall, and we changed into outfits that we'd bought at the Goodwill that day too, and we came out as Colin Moulton's roadies, and we had to sell all the stuff that we were. That we bought at the garage sale, and we stayed in character the whole time. Even when we're talking to people after we're at the merch table selling this stuff, people are like, "You had a great show tonight." We're like, "We'll let them know."
Yeah.
So it was great. So Colin commits to the bit, and that's actually how we became friends.
He's
the
so
first time we
fucking
met,
fun, dude. He's so fun.
we met at Morty's, and I watched the show, blown away by it. We had a lot of similarities. At the time, he was high energy, I was high energy. We both had characters on stage, all this stuff. So I was like, who is this guy? Is this me from the future? Who the fuck is this? And so he was out at the bar, and I came up to him, and he started doing like this old man voice, and I started doing this old man voice, and we sat there trying to make the other one break, but we're both too stubborn. We sat there for 45 minutes as two old men talking about a funeral that we had not gone to and just trying to get the other one to be like, all right, man, what's up? How are you?
Yeah, like I can't do it anymore.
Yeah. And it was, we've been a family ever since,
Yeah, he's great, man. And
Yeah,
I did watch a little bit of the footage you shared of him at the piano, and
oh man.
he's just he's a different cat, man, and he's just always great to be around. He's one of those guys that you like to see something really big happen for, because he'd be ready.
Yeah.
And America would love him, it's
and that's what that's what I'm loving doing now, is helping people develop. They're coming to me if they have a half hour, an hour ready. I watch it, I help punch it up, or I find a heartbeat, or I help them dig a little deeper. We workshop that. I watch them through the process, tag it up, do whatever they need me to do on that end, and then film it and edit it and put it all together for them. So it's like a one-stop shop of people that are trying to do either a straight up comedy special, like I can tag that up and do whatever, but more so for people that are trying to dig a little deeper or have a little heartbeat in what they're trying to do.
Boy, do I have a project for you, Michael. We're gonna have to talk about this off the air, because I already know you're gonna love it. I already know.
I'm game. Let's do it.
It's an idea I had during COVID that I wanted to do once COVID got, I can't say over, but whatever.
The lockdowns.
But yeah, but one of fucking Chris Porter talked me out of it, and I don't know why I let him, because he's fucking Porter.
Yeah.
But, like, I've never actually sat in a room with Porter and had him go, "That's a great idea." Like, I have never fucking heard that out of his mouth.
Yeah.
And he's Porter. Great. I love it. I don't mean to. That makes it sound like he's a fucking prick or something, but I've just never had him be like. I mean, he's always given me props for being a good comic and all that. Like, he's never, but I've never talked to him about a thing and him be like, "Oh yeah, fucking great idea." Like,
that'll work.
Fucking pokes all the holes in everything.
Right?
Yeah.
Those people are an absolute fucking killjoy, anyways. Like, let me have my 5 fucking seconds of excitement before you shit all over it.
Yeah, it's almost in a way he's going, "You're not good enough to do that." Like,
it's not even that.
I'm saying Porter. I'm saying when you're talking to Porter, he's like, it's like fucking, yeah. I mean, I could do it, like, but You're not.
You're not gonna do that.
My
you're
old
not.
man was like that.
Who the fuck do you think you are doing?
My old man was like that. It didn't matter what I came up with. I'd come up with it. He'd be like, "Oh, that would never work because of blah 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 blah."
Yeah.
Hey, motherfucker, why don't I have 30 seconds of a little bit of fantasy before you fucking
Right.
crap all over it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it could work, you know. Well, what's your plan? I don't know.
I don't
Yeah.
know
This
yet.
This is step 1 of 800.
The idea
I'm on
is the
step
first step.
1.
Right.
What's your backup plan? We're 5 minutes into the fucking conversation.
Well,
Great.
I think when it comes to being creative, and especially being creative for a living, people don't understand the amount of ideas that don't get executed
Oh my
as
God,
compared to the ones that do. I mean, we've all got a million ideas, and then you might start to develop one. You might take the next step, get into the beginning stages of it, and then that just fizzles out. And then some of them you get even further and it fizzles out. Like
Right.
something going from start to completion is so hard in itself
Yeah.
that I'm amazed by someone like Michael who has completed. I mean, you filmed several comedy specials now.
Yeah.
You've got a couple of projects. I mean, you've I'm trying not to talk out of my ass because, you know, I don't remember everything because, I mean, you know, obviously I'm not sitting here trying to find a way to suck Michael Malone's dick all the time.
No.
But, you know.
No, keep
But-
going.
Isn't that what you were talking about before? About how you sometimes you like to do that? Wasn't that the conversation earlier?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's pretty much how I got on the podcast. Is I was like, how many green room blowjobs does it take to get you to come on this show?
Yeah.
I felt like I've paid my dues.
So funny.
But mental health wise, like, I know that you've always talked openly and honestly, even on stage, about your own mental health. And how much of what you're doing now is driven just by that, just having some peace? I mean, are you finding your daily disposition being better with these projects than just doing stand-up?
Yeah, what I'm finding now is, you know, I'm finally having the time to actually have a life. You know, I was touring 40 or 46 weeks a year for a long time. And actually having time with myself, by myself, which sounds kind of ironic because when you're touring, you're by yourself, but it's not the same energy. You know,
it's not the same by yourself. You have something to look forward to.
Yeah, and
it's
planes, trains, and automobiles, and then you're performing, and then you're hanging, and then like you're sleeping in. It's not life,
Right.
And so what I'm finding now is I'm having a lot more downtime, a lot more time for me. So I'm discovering a lot more about myself and finding all these things that I'm like, oh shit, is this what this is? And therapy is becoming a regular thing now in my life, where it was kind of spotty before. Now I actually have time for it and actually to work on myself. And I'm loving that. And my buddy and I actually just started a podcast about a month ago called Secondhand Therapy. And we found ourselves calling each other up after our separate therapy sessions and being like, guess what I learned today?
Yeah.
And I jokingly called it secondhand therapy. And we were, going back and forth every week. And then I was like, we just thought we should be recording this or sharing this and maybe it could help somebody. And I think what sets it apart is that we aren't gurus. We aren't professionals. Right. We aren't, people like screaming at you about motivation. Like, you got to set your alarm for 4 a.m. every day.
Yeah. You start out by making your bed.
Yeah.
Right.
We are literally two dudes that are going through it and trying to figure it the fuck out. And that's what the show is literally discussing what we are discussing and experiencing in our own therapy sessions, sharing it with each other and being like, dude, guess what I fucking learned this week?
Yeah.
And then just talking about it. And the feedback has been incredible. The growth on social media has been, I didn't know that there was such an empty space for that. We have 10 episodes up and I think we have like 15,000 followers on TikTok now and all this crazy stuff. We've
get on it, Chris.
Yes.
Get your fucking shit together, Chris.
It's been great.
Hey, hey, guess what? Michael Malone just stole my fucking idea and has more followers. No, it's like essentially that's Chris and I. Like, I mean, that's
Everything
kinda,
on this podcast is copyrighted, Michael. So
Right.
it's our idea.
I had to get like the beginning stages of this. I spent a lot of time trying to get Chris to go to therapy. And so,
Right,
because Chris never, like, he was all about this whole mental health, and the idea, which I explained to you, is to have men be more comfortable talking about this.
Yeah.
And having fun talking about hard things. Because that's basically the mission of the whole thing. And comics, we're really good at that.
Yeah.
We're really good at bringing levity. Sometimes we're bad at reading the room, as in
Right.
Really? That
sometimes no, I mean we're good at reading the room in general. Like,
right. Okay.
But sometimes we'll drop a joke in when it's probably wasn't quite like I'll give you a good example. This is my fucking family. So my stepmom's sister, so my aunt, so to speak, right? She is a big Trump pansy, like conspiracy theory person. At one point, her husband he was in the hospital with COVID, and she was running up down the hall saying that they put it in him, and she was going to sue. And like, she had a son who was gay. How you suppose that worked out, right?
Right.
Which it actually wasn't as bad as you'd think. They actually did have somewhat of a relationship, but you know how it is. I'm sure the back of his head was never. But anyway, he committed suicide last year. Or I'm sorry, no one's said that for sure. It's kind of an assumption. But accident / to either way, right? Fast forward couple 3 months ago, 3 months ago or so, her husband kills himself. Shoots himself in the head. Didn't quite die on the scene. Went back to the hospital, was alive for a couple more days. Had him on all the stuff. He's an organ donor. They're sitting there in the room with the organ donor lady, my stepmom and her, and I don't know who else. They're explaining everything. And they ask her if he was allergic to anything. And she says, yeah, bullets.
I was waiting for something.
I was too. I wasn't sure where this was going. This is where I could have used a couple breadcrumbs to keep me going.
100% true.
Oh my
100% true. And what do? It's her fucking husband. She can make all the jokes she wants.
Right.
Like, what the fuck? What are you gonna? I personally, way up on cool points for me. Like, earned so much of my respect.
Michael. This is the theme of the pod. Is typically Bill goes completely off the rails with some crazy fucking story, and then I break in and want to get a word from our sponsor about this time.
So funny.
With that levity of a story, we're gonna get a word from our sponsor, Revelton, and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna continue our discussion with Michael Malone.
So funny.
At Revelton Distilling Company, everyone has become a part of the Revelton family. From the Taylors and their daughter who helped perfect their award-winning gins, to the team who installed Lucy, our 33-foot-tall custom-made still, right down to the local farms that provide our coveted corn, and even the cows on those farms who consume our mash byproduct. Want to see the farm to flask come to life? Now you can tour Lucy and find out where we take Iowa's harvest and transform it into our finest spirits. Choose between a 45-minute tour or find out even more by scheduling a VIP behind-the-scenes tour to get the taste of the full Revelton experience. You can visit them at 1400 West Clay Street in Osceola, Iowa, or Find all of Revelton's award-winning spirits at any local grocery or spirits retailer.
All right, and we are back with Michael Malone on False Starts. Everybody go check out Revelton Distilling Company. Go down to their tasting room. And their new rye whiskey is now available in most liquor stores, Hy-Vee, Fairway, and groceries. So, Michael, again, we really appreciate you coming on with us. You're doing your series now. You've done some specials.
Mhm.
What's coming up for you?
Like I said, I'm trying to work on another season of Punched Up. I've always wanted to do it, and now I'm having a little bit more time, and so I'm trying to put that together. I have a series coming out of these interviews that we shot in Las Vegas at Brad Garrett's club. There's a handful of them. It's called Stand Up, Sit Down. Brad produced them, and I sit down with like guys like Dave Landau and Tom Rhodes and Jen Kober, and just
We had
really
Jen
fun
on here.
interviews. Oh, Jen's great.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah,
She was on earlier.
Yeah, I shot her special in Vegas, and she usually, so I would go in early and watch the acts throughout the week, and then give notes and do whatever, and then at the end we would film the special for the last few days of the week there in Vegas. And I came to Jen, I'd watched her 3 nights in a row, and I came to her Thursday night, and I go, I have no notes. She's like, really? And I was like, it's
you can't touch
fucking
her.
great.
You can't touch her. You just gotta
She's
Yeah.
incredible.
She is incredible.
Yeah, her special's great. And so I had her on for one of the sit downs, and then we have a couple roundtable episodes coming out under that same name that have like Danny Bevins on, and Jill Kimmel, and Big Irish J, and a lot of those guys like that. It's a really fun little series. And then I'm trying to put together the storyteller show as far as like solo things go, and really take the shift from stand up to more storytelling, like a Birbiglia or a Titus or something like that.
Sure. Mark chimes in here. Bill, he's right on board with you. He said even he made a joke in his own mom's funeral. So,
I mean, I remember when my 2 best friends, when their dad died, we were in our early 20s, and the 2 of them at the visitation were in like at the front pew, and there's their dead dad, like open casket right there. And the 2 of them are sitting there trying to break me. Like, and they would see like me turn, because they can laugh.
right. It's
All these other
yeah.
people, they don't know that I'm family too. They don't know that about me. Some of them do, but most of them have no idea. I mean, the next day I did the eulogy at the funeral and stuff. Like I was that close, but so many of their extended family doesn't know that. So I'm like, I can't be sitting here fucking laughing.
Right.
They're just being relentless. And I think sometimes that's just how people deal with the shit, honestly. And
so
I think it's okay.
That was the question I was going to lead up to. So you guys are obviously in the business of comedy and levity and things like that. But I think, Bill, I agree with you. I think that a lot of times in those types of situations or whatever, comedy and levity is almost required and needed sometimes. I mean, Caitlin and I have talked a lot about, sometimes on our podcast, when there's shit flying around in our family or whatever else, sometimes the best thing to do is just fucking make fun of it.
Yeah.
Because that's how we deal with it.
Yeah, I look at it as like a little bit of sugar makes the medicine go down. And that's how I've tried to blend in the jokes with the message, a little bit of sugar makes it go down a little bit. And that's, way better.
And so talk a little bit about, though, dealing with all that law. I mean, your stepdad came into your life when
I was 15.
Okay, so you were raised by a single mother up until then, correct?
Yeah, so my father, I joke around that he was on everything but the right path, and he really wasn't around. And I put it like this: my father had 3 other kids from a separate marriage, and my father loved like babies, but he didn't like children. And so yeah, he was around when I was really young, but then just kind of disappeared and was in and out of my life. And so then he passed away when I was 12, and I was the one that found him. He passed away in his sleep, and then my mother went 3 years single, and then she met Wayne, and her and Wayne started dating, and they got married, all that fun stuff. And Wayne was great, and he was like a savior to my family. And then Wayne passed, and about a year later, my mother passed, both unexpectedly when I was around 30. And then my grandmother just recently passed during COVID and all this stuff. So I've been dealing with grief since I was young. My grandfather passed, my uncle passed, then my father, like 3 male figures in my life back to back from the ages of when I was 10 to 12. And it was just my mother and my grandmother pretty much in my life raising me.
Do you feel like where do you feel like that helped, and where do you feel like it didn't? Like, is there any negative? I mean, I'm sure there's some negativity with not having like a positive male role model all the time, but I don't know. How have you dealt with it?
Yeah, it's really changed my relationships with other men, because I can't connect in a lot of ways that they do. Like I don't watch sports. I don't know how to fucking change my oil. Like these traditional ideas.
You're a fucking pussy. You fucking pussy, Michael.
Exactly. So all these things that like traditionally are more towards the stereotype of what a man is. Like I just don't relate to that. But on the other side of it, I was given the gift of more empathy and more understanding and listening and stuff like that from my mother and grandmother. But they also had a lot of strength to them. They were 2 badass women. My grandmother her story is incredible, and I share some of it on my last special, Wait and See. It's all about my grandmother and her abusive past relationships and escaping death from her ex-husband, and the loss that she survived in her life, and how strong she was, and all these examples that she set for me. That the whole special's about that. And my mother was in the same way. I saw a lot of strength in my mother because it was just her. She's working 2 jobs. She's working I come from a factory town in Ohio. And so it was never like, is your dad a doctor or a lawyer? It's like, what shift does your father work?
Yeah. Everybody in the town worked at that factory.
Yep. Yeah. There were 3 factories in town, and everybody worked at one of them. Yep. And so my mother worked second shift. And so she'd get home at midnight or 1 a.m. sometimes from the factory. And some of my memories growing up, my best memories growing up would be some nights I get to stay up and wait for her to come home,
Oh, yeah.
And I would, one of the funniest things is like, this is parenting, right? So I would hide in the same spot every time. I would hide in the fucking clothes hamper in the bathroom every time. And my mother would come home and she would ask grandma, well, where's Michael? And then they would have like a little play that they worked out. I haven't seen him. What do you mean you haven't seen him? Back and forth. And then sure enough, my mother would act surprised every time. She's searching through the house, and then she'd come in the bathroom. I don't know where he is, and I'd pop out of the hamper. Hey, she'd be like, oh, thank God. And it was like, but how many fucking times a mother will do that 100 times?
Right.
And
right.
Even knew that she knew you were in there.
Of course. I mean,
and you did it anyway because
it was anyways.
But I think that stuff gets so underestimated. Like I remember a buddy of mine talking about making core memories with his kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I wish someone would have fucking given me that term when my son was small.
Yeah.
If I would have thought of things, and that goddamn label would have made me such a better father. If I would have thought of things in that way. It's not like he didn't have his core memories, but I would have been more purposeful with them.
I think
You
a
would
lot
have been
of,
more cognizant of it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times though, time moves in such a way that when we think about time, it's long, and when we don't think about it, it flies by. And I experienced this with my ex, and she had a daughter, and she was 12 when I came in. The ex wasn't 12; the daughter was 12.
She just
But,
acted 12. Oh,
oh, but she had a 12-year-old daughter, and when I met with her, and then I was with her all the way until she turned 16. But in that time, when you're dealing with children, it almost feels like you're just trying to get through the day a lot of the times. And you're forgetting to actually spend those moments with them, like you're talking about. Make these core memories, actually be active in their lives, because to you, it's just I got to get through I got this to do, I got that. You have adult shit going on that you're trying to work through. To them, they have it's an empty fucking slate, and you are kind of the world to them. And so, but we don't think of it that way until it's too late, and that hindsight, and then you're like, I should have played catch with them more, and you're like, well, you fucking didn't. So here we are.
But I think that's why grandparents have such a superiority complex and want to like parent your parenting, because they know they're watching you literally.
They're getting a second chance.
Right?
Yeah,
and they're thinking to themselves how they would have smelled the roses more. And they're always saying, "Hey, enjoy them while they're this age. It goes by quick, you know."
Yep. My old man, I remember one time I was yelling at Tyler about something, and this was before he transitioned, so it was Taylor. But I was on her pretty hard, and my dad goes, "Hey, you should not yell at that little girl." What? What fucking house are we in? Like, you yelled at me every day of my life.
Like, and I regret it. But did he say that though?
And he goes, and that was wrong.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't know what to do now.
Is this you saying you're sorry? Come on, say you're sorry so I can be a mess right now.
Right. Like, is that the closest I'm going to get to an apology? I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, well, let's be honest. You really don't want an apology. You never wanted an apology, because if you got one, you'd have fucking lost your mind.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Oh,
but it's
God,
the same
Dad.
thing.
Oh,
I mean, he would watch me and he'd be like, "You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that." And even now, I'll have a conversation with my wife, and I'll do something with the boys or whatever, and she'll be like, "You shouldn't." And I sometimes will go. I struggle with it, right? Because I'll say, yeah, she's probably right, but then I'll go, do you think that I'm a good person and a good man and a good husband? And she's like, well, yeah. I was like, well, I'm not. How do you think I got that way? Like, I was raised in this way. That's how my dad raised me. Yeah. So, but yeah, there's probably a better way to do it. But as he got older, 100% what you're saying, Bill, that he would recognize those things and reparent me, because he knew the mistakes that he had made.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Well, and like, how's that been? I think you and I I went through my divorce kind of around the same time, I think. I guess yours is a little more recent.
I think the last time I was there, you were going through it, and I had the daughter with me.
That's right,
Iowa.
That's right.
Yeah, she was.
But when I saw you in Vegas, where were you at then? Were you still together then?
Still together then.
I thought so. I thought she was there.
She might have been there. Yeah. Probably.
Anyway,
she would come all the fun stuff.
Yeah, but that's been a couple of years though. I mean, I don't think it was too much longer after that.
Yeah, we've been split for a little over a year now.
So yeah, I mean, did you find yourself in like a non-creative funk there for a while?
Oh, absolutely. It was starting over, in many ways, and I didn't really know. I was already not happy with doing stand-up, but I didn't know what to do with myself. I struggled a lot during COVID with identity crisis.
Oh, me and you both. That was my whole
It was this idea of like, who am I without comedy? And I didn't know how
and then there goes, and then my wife leaves me, and it's like, oh, fucking thanks.
Yeah,
thanks for being a trooper.
It's like that Nick Griffin joke. I love this fucking joke about
Nick
his
Griffin's
wife's
great.
Nick Griffin's the best.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how his wife was saying that he is too depressed and he needs to get therapy. And then they got divorced, and he's like, well, this divorce should help. Just fucking great. So sharp. But yeah, so I really was kind of upside down last year around this last October. Actually, I was just kind of in this area of like, I didn't know what to do with myself, and I didn't know how to get out of it, and I was at a really low point. But now things are way better. I'm feeling way more creative. I'm in therapy. I'm working through a lot of things. I like to say that I'm not hoeing, I'm healing right now. So I'm not really getting out there and doing stuff, but I'm still in the daughter's life. I'm
that's
still
cool.
That's good.
That was one of the things I wanted to make sure when we split, that like I wanted to be in her life as long as she wanted me to be.
Yeah,
And
she was important. You were important to her in her life. It's not, just because you and her mother were not together, it doesn't mean
Right.
she's not gonna go through some stuff, and she can just turn off her feelings.
Right. And she
And I
doesn't
think
have
a lot of people don't realize that.
no, and she doesn't have a lot of strong male figures in her life. And I wanted to be what it's like we talk about all the time. Like if you want to see the change, be the change.
Right.
And that was an instance where I felt like I could actually help out in that, and I could actually maybe change that narrative a little bit and be like, hey, I know that you don't have a great track record with other men, but I'm here to tell you that like not all guys are like that, and I'm here for you. And anytime you want, like I'm here. I'm a phone call away. And so we've gone out a few times. It's movies and stuff like that, or just hangs. It took her record store shopping and this and that. Just whatever, and just trying to stay active in her life and be there as much as again she wants me to be. I'm not trying to like force it or be on it, but when you need me, I'm here.
Yeah.
Well, and I would imagine it was probably hard for you as well. I think now I'm in my second marriage. I've raised the boys with their mom. I mean, their dad was always involved, but they were with us the majority of the time since they graduated kindergarten. So they're 20 now. So I couldn't imagine now if something were to happen, me all of a sudden going, well, I'm okay. I don't need a relationship with them. That would not. It would be like me saying my own kids. I couldn't do that. That would be very hard to do and process.
And I didn't understand that idea of that love that. I never wanted children. I never thought I would have children, all that stuff. I still don't want children or have anything to do with it. This just happened to be like a perfect scenario. She was already a little older, and we were able to connect, and she was super cool and all those things. And we just got along. And it was heartbreaking when, the split happened. And, I never understood that kind of love that goes in with kind of parent figure and child. And Wayne had that for me. And a lot of those times it was like a full circle moment for me. And, Wayne would talk about all the time, you feel like my own kid, or I think about you like you're my own son. And, the love he had for me. And I, as growing up and even as an adult, you're like, yeah, I know, I love you too, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But when she came into my life, it was the first time like, oh, this is what that love is.
Yeah. He wasn't full of shit.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I fucking love this little girl. Like, that's my girl.
That's been the major, like for me, my divorce, I had 2 stepkids for over 10 years. I mean, I was with them when they were 5 and 3, and they were, they were 16 and 18 when we split. And I haven't spoken to either one of them in 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And I tried at first. Yeah. I tried sending them both money on their birthday, and they got sent back to me.
Man,
that's
unfathomable to me that
I couldn't keep trying. Once all that happened, it was like, okay,
right.
And I'm sure the narrative was probably spun, because initially I was trying to save my marriage,
Sure.
So,
yeah.
I'm sure initially it was spun like I was trying to manipulate the kids somehow, or
right.
something like that. And then later on, once all the facts of everything started coming out, then of course I had to be demonized in order to rationalize,
Sure.
the shit that
Right.
she pulled. So,
Yeah.
it's fine. I'm okay, but it hurt. It bothers me. I felt like I was basically raising them for 10 years, and I was
Yeah.
pretty attached to them. But
And
Yeah,
you don't know,
absolutely.
like
You
it'll
know.
come back around. You know what I mean? Like
we'll
that's
see.
the-
I mean, maybe. I don't know.
I
I've
mean-
got my son though. I mean, it's not like I lost my actual son.
Right.
I've got him, so it's
But people get older and
But
they
it-
realize, that's the thing about also with aging and all those things and the circle of life and hindsight and all those things we talk
Yeah.
about. Like, you don't know what's going to happen with them.
well, they would have to. I believe that they were made to believe I was abusive somehow.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
I think happened, and you have to make me look like that. If you run off with your best friend's husband, you kind of got to make it look like I did something wrong.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
So, like, what do you?
I always,
I mean, you'd think they'd be old enough to kind of put that together. They knew the
Right.
people,
Right.
so you kind of just seeing that would be like, this doesn't smell right.
Right. Yeah.
It's their mom,
I've
Yeah.
learned. Yeah, but you know what, Bill? That I don't know that matters because I've learned, especially in my situation with my kids from my first marriage. Eventually, the truth filters out, and they figure it out. And the relationship now that my daughter Caitlin has with her real mom is not good at all.
Mhm.
And I'm sure from the other side, I am blamed a little bit for that. But I have never, I've never filtered the information that has went to Caitlin. I've let whatever happens, and let her figure it out. And I knew that she was intelligent and smart, and she would make her own decisions. I can't say that I sit here and I'm happy that she doesn't have a relationship with her because I never would want that. But I certainly am not going to interfere on behalf of my ex-wife, and I'm certainly not going to tell Caitlin that her feelings are not valid because I know I know how that relationship ended and what kind of a mother she was. I certainly don't double down on it, but I don't certainly go to Caitlin, you shouldn't act that way or you shouldn't feel that way because her feelings are valid.
Well, I've always been, when it came to my son and his mom, because, I mean, full disclosure, I can't fucking stand his mom. Like, it's like, if it weren't for my son, I would have no redeeming, like, anything.
Oh, I'm
Like,
with you.
it's
I
like,
get it.
Her voice is nails on a chalkboard to me. Her personality is just, everything about her is annoying. And she's always gotten mad. She's
agree.
always been pissed off. Well, I mean,
maybe it's the same lady. I don't know. Maybe
I left her. That's the thing. I've got 2 divorces under my belt, and the first one I left, the second one I was left, and so I know what it's like to be both people. And when I ever since I left, I know what it's like to be the person that isn't loved. You know what I mean? And so, like, that was her. She was one that wasn't loved. And in fact, I straight up said that eventually. I was just like, look, I don't love you. This isn't going to get better.
Yeah.
I got to go. My son's going to grow up thinking you're an asshole. Like,
right.
Or I'm an asshole or both or whatever. So, like, and I think she held on to that anger forever. And now he's 21 years old. So she can't hold me hostage in a co-parenting conversation anymore. None of that can happen now. And and over the years, she always got mad when I'd set a boundary. She'd call me and I'd ignore the call.
Yeah.
Call me again. I'd ignore the call. Then I'd get a text. Hey, call me when you get a chance. And I'd be like, about what? And then she'd say in the text. So all of it could have been texted to begin with.
Right.
But she wants to hold me hostage on the phone. Right.
Yes.
So I knew this move. So I always did it. Well, here recently, she just called me out of the blue. So I said, I'm busy. What's up? Oh, nothing earth shattering. No big deal. Week later, text message. Hey, call me when you have a chance to chat. About what? Well, our son, LOL. Not sure what else it would be about. And I'm like, well, I understand that, but he's 21 years old.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then I get, okay, heard. Like I'm gonna pick up the phone. Oh no, wait, no.
Yeah.
And so like once you set those boundaries,
I
but now
swear to God.
I don't have to renege on them. Like
I swear to God.
so
it's
I
the
called
same
my
lady.
son and I was like, why is your mom calling me?
Yeah.
He's like, I don't know. I ignored her call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I actually said to him, I go, well, now, and then I said, well, it's probably, I'm sure she's concerned with something. Are you not working enough? Are you not giving her money you're supposed to give her? What's going on? So he tells me all this shit, and I just go, well, like, you're starting to learn why I divorced her. You fucking get it now.
Yeah.
Now I can say shit like that, you know?
Right. No,
Yeah.
Like, you live with her, you fucking know.
I'm sorry.
bro.
I've had the exact same conversation
That's great.
and the exact same text conversations with her. It
So-
might be the same lady. I don't know. Maybe.
So, Michael, like, so your parents were together when your dad died?
Yeah, but my father was in and out of the relationship. He was it's such a wild story. So my father was sober for the majority of his life, but he was stuck working in these factories and he didn't want to be. So one day he came home from working the forklift and he told my mother that he was tired of working in the factory and he had a plan to get out. And my mother said, well, what are you going to do? And he goes, my friends and I are getting together. We're going to buy a bar. And she goes, well, you don't know anything about, you don't drink. What are you talking about? You're going to buy a bar. And he goes, I'm tired of working in the factory. I'm going to buy a bar. And so we did. And then he started doing bar things and drinking and doing all that. And it kind of tore him apart. But his ex-wife was kind of around, you know, they were still in his life and he was still a father to those kids. And the bar didn't make it. And he started driving truck for a little while. And he got in an accident. And in the book that I wrote called Dead Serious, the story about my father is I talk about how his doctor was his first drug dealer. He put him on a bunch of pain pills.
Yeah.
My father couldn't get off of them. So now he's a drinker and he's on all these pain pills. And his ex was on a bunch of pain pills. And so they would drink, and because my mom really didn't do those things. So he would hang out with her and drink and do pills and then try to come home to my mom. And it was always just back and forth. And my mother was always really good, though, at never letting me think anything different of my father. While, you know, still, even when I got older, you know, I never knew a whole lot about my father, and especially the bad shit. But we were driving, I was like 29, and we were driving home from Thanksgiving, and we were coming from Columbus back to Marion, where I grew up, and she points to this prison off to the right, and she goes, well, that's the prison your dad was in. And I was like,
What?
when? What are you talking about? She's like, oh, he was blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
So
I'd
matter,
never
just
heard
matter
that.
of fact like that?
Right.
yeah. And so
It's like, this is where your grandmother grew up, and this is where I got my first kiss, and this is where your dad was in prison.
This is
Yeah.
where you were conceived in a conjugal visit. This is
Right.
what I didn't tell you, son.
right. But you have
I
some-
was wild. Man.
yeah. So my mother did a really good job of separating those ideas of who my father was, so that my father throughout my life was always just my dad. You know, I didn't think of him any other way until, you know, you get older, you hear the more adult stories and you start to unravel,
Sure.
you know, and even in the book, I say, like, you know, a man is only as good as the stories you tell about him. And that's, I find that to be very true. There, you know, who are you without those stories that people tell about you? And, you know, my father had a lot of those stories, and you connect them as you get older. And one of the, this is my favorite story and the most heartbreaking one. I have a half sister named Heather, and after my mother died, Heather and I got together, and we're sharing stories about mom, and she was my my father's daughter. So she was that past relationship. And so she was sharing stories about dad and all these things. And 'cause she had a different version of him. She had sober him. She had like dad of the year him. And I had messy dad.
Yeah.
And so we're comparing stories and doing all this. And she was talking about when she was pregnant with her daughter, dad used to come by her house and he'd have pizza or he'd have just some cash for her. And he would just come by the house and just, knock on the door and, hey, I was in the neighborhood. I just thought, you might need this, or I brought you some food or whatever. And one of the last times she saw my father, he knocked on her door and he was strung out and asking her for money for pills. And that's the dichotomy of the two sides of my father. Was this great man once, and then just this other thing that he became.
Yeah. He was sick.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
I
feel like
I
that's
don't-
what people don't, and this is what we're talking about with mental illness. Mental illness begats all of that. This is undiagnosed. He was a factory dude, a truck dude, a bar dude. He's of that. I imagine if he were alive now, he'd probably be 70 something, right?
yeah.
Same as all of our dads. My dad's that same generation. You dealt with it, and like you said, he hated working in that factory every day. Well, the biggest reason he probably hated it was unfulfilled potential in his head somewhere.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so he gets out of there, opens up the bar. He was probably thinking at the time, I don't drink. Like, I think about this all the time. I even asked somebody the other day, how much Coke can I get for 10 grand? Because I don't do Coke.
Right.
If I had 10 grand worth of Coke and I sold all of it, I could make a shit ton of money because I won't do any of it.
Yeah.
So, like, I can't have a pound of weed sitting around. I'm going to smoke half of it. I'm going to lose
Right.
on that deal.
Smoke his profits right up.
Yeah.
But it's the same. He was probably thinking, I open up this bar.
Right.
It's pure profit.
I don't drink. I'm just going to make nothing but money. And then he starts drinking. And then the booze are free, basically.
Yeah.
And then, so on and so forth. And next thing you know.
If you're drinking, you're probably not running the business the way you should.
100.
You're not. You don't have your faculties to
100%.
things like that.
And then you got fucking bartenders stealing from you because you're drunk all the time.
Right.
So whoever you employ is stealing from under your nose.
And you got friends coming in and they're
Yes,
hanging.
You're just giving them free booze. I mean, it's a.
Yeah.
Now, had he stayed sober, he probably would have done a great business. Probably would have been fine.
Yeah.
But I think the drinking was probably dealing with the stress of having your own business, and part of it was he probably went. I mean, if he had a family already in place before you, he'd been a father his whole adult life, basically.
Yeah.
So he never had to have any fun.
Yeah.
So he's
he was
probably
in the
ready to have a
military,
little
he
bit of fun,
had a
stick
family.
of
Yeah.
responsibility,
Yep.
and all that. It was just that perfect storm of shit, and he just never got out of that hole.
Well,
He got into that rut and never got out.
And you're part of the story where you talked about his doctor was his first drug dealer.
Mm-hmm.
I watched a docu-film on Netflix called Painkiller. I don't know if you've seen it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about how OxyContin was prescribed through these doctors, and they took 6 people's stories and for 6 episodes kind of talked about it. And there is a gentleman who is a character in this movie that is a true story of a hardworking guy that had his own mechanic shop, and he was a loving father, and he took care of his wife, and he got injured on the job, and they gave him this OxyContin, and it destroyed his entire life. It destroyed his marriage, his relationship with his kids. He was, stealing from his kids. It was gut-wrenching to watch.
Yeah.
Just as a TV show. So, I mean, just to hear you say that immediately just makes me just sad to see.
There's another
something
one
like that.
There was one that came out before this called Dope Sick. It was on Hulu. Michael Keaton plays a doctor in that. And that's a true story where Michael Keaton, the doctor, got hooked on OxyContin. It started with the pharmaceutical companies and just pain management. It was all done under the guise of pain. You don't
And
have to
that's-
be in pain. These drugs are amazing, you know.
That's
and
what
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
one was too. It was all
and you
about
didn't
how
take
they
it as
sent these-
prescribed, you know.
Yep.
But that's what happens if you're not taking it. You know, at the time they didn't know how to prescribe it. They didn't know how to take somebody's weight and you know, all that stuff and give you this many
No.
milligrams. It was
Right.
just here you fucking go.
And the doctor that was giving my father's medicine years later went to prison because he was over prescribing people. He was selling it under the table. He was,
Yeah.
I mean, it was legit like drug dealing.
Yeah. Well, like when I was in the hospital, I was on fentanyl. Like I had a fucking fentanyl drip, and you could only get it every 10 minutes. And so if it hadn't been 10 minutes, the light turned red, you know, it turned green if you could have some. That fucking light the first 2 nights was nothing but red. I was just like, but I remember at no point did I ever feel euphoric. Like, I mean, I had pancreatitis, and that is by far more pain than I have experienced in my life before, since, you name it. Like, it's the worst. And I have a very high tolerance for pain, and this shit knocked my dick in the dirt. So I was like hurting. But I never felt euphoric. And every doctor said, I talked about that, and they were like, because there's this whole fucking epidemic right now with fentanyl and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, Donnie Baker just fucking died because of it. And I'm pretty sure he got it in Des Moines. Because another guy I know died. I'm pretty sure it was probably the same exact fucking batch.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's beside the point. The point is, when I said something about that, they said that's because you were getting the right dosage. The use was getting used for what it was intended for.
Right.
So I think that's what happened with OxyContin. They never took the time to find the right dosage. They just fucking saw the money.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so how do you, I mean, I am not of the belief that all comics went through some trauma necessarily. I think all humans have gone through some trauma.
Yeah.
I'm not that guy that's like, you know, misery loves company, that whole you got to be fucking secretly miserable, sad clown thing. I don't subscribe to that, because I've never considered myself the sad clown.
Right.
I mean, I've always considered myself in tune. I feel like you've always been a guy that's always just been pretty in tune with how you're feeling in the moment.
Yeah. I've never really radiated with that and that energy, and things definitely changed after my parents passed. But I never associated with like. It was always talking about the darkness and not really thriving in it. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, it was fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, at least if you're talking about it, it's getting released.
Yeah, and that was the thing that I've been talking to my therapist a lot about, is this idea of how I was publicly processing everything in the past and how different it is now to be kind of privately processing things, and the dopamine attached to that, the energy attached to that, the healing that's attached to that. It's interesting to go from publicly processing to privately.
How much time do you spend waiting for the shoe to drop? Do you
Oh,
struggle
God.
with that?
I've never heard of that, Bill. I don't know what you're talking about. Every fucking day. Every fucking day.
It's coming.
Yeah. It's so funny. I'll close out with you guys with this little full circle thing about my father and my path. So my father was trying to find a way out of his hometown, right? He's trying to find a way out of factory life. He's trying to get out, and he couldn't do it. And he died at a pretty young age. He was 47, and just couldn't get on the right path, couldn't clean up, couldn't figure it out. And then I come along and I get out of that town, and I don't work in the factory, and I do this for a living. And last year I got to do the Irish comedy tour. And so we're doing a bunch of big theaters. It's 16 different stops. We're talking New York, Boston, Wisconsin, Florida. Like, we're all over the place. It's great. I'm closing out the shows. We're in Minnesota, and we're in this little factory town. It's legit just a big factory, a couple small like mom and pop stores, and a theater. And I'm playing the theater. And I had this revelation, this full circle moment, this breakdown in my hotel room. I'm in this really nice, swanky hotel room. I'm playing the theater down the street, and I can see the factory outside my window. And I'm just crying because I'm thinking about how different my life is from my father's, and how he tried so hard to get out of that town and couldn't figure it out. And I somehow figured it out. And thinking back now and wishing that he was still with me, and wishing that I could show him, help him, anything to make his life better, to take some of that stress and pain away from him, and bring him with me on this. And that's something I'll never be able to do. And it was just a full circle moment of his life versus my life, and how much has changed. And that drive, I have my father's drive. You know what I mean? I had the same goals. I had the same heart. I had the same ideas. I got to get the fuck out of here. And
you didn't get derailed.
Yeah. And how lucky I was to
not get any bitches pregnant.
Right. Not do any of that stuff, to not make the same mistakes that my father made. Because I think oftentimes, especially when you have a not great relationship with your parents, be it mother or father, a lot of the times you look in the mirror and you can't help but see them.
Right.
And a lot of the times, a lot of my self-love and self-talk is associated with, you are not your father.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments where it's like, man,
I'm definitely not.
Yeah.
Well, and even, just on the surface, you think about a story like that, and you're thinking like, well, what do you mean? You could have fucking moved and got a job in another town, but he would have just went to another town and to another factory. Like, he probably, like, you were lucky enough to find this definable talent.
Yeah.
That you knew you had, and you had the balls. And I think seeing his unhappiness is what gave you the balls. Because I feel like that's the same thing that my stepdad worked in a factory, worked nights my whole life, and he was fucking miserable every fucking day. Miserable. He didn't treat us bad, but he just was not in a good mood. He was always tired. He was just in this shitty fucking sweatshop.
Yeah.
And I knew that he hated going there every day. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I told myself right away in my adult life, like, I will not get up miserable like that every fucking day. I am not going to have fuck be the first word out of my mouth every morning when I wake up.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think, I think for you, it was that same thing. It's just like, dude, so if you you were blessed. What happened in a way blessed you? Like,
oh, I'm trying to change my mindset. This is my new thing this is hard to fucking even wrap my mind around, is changing the narrative of things aren't happening to you, they're happening for you.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
or because of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we talked about this on on secondhand therapy a few episodes ago. My buddy Lou and I were talking about it, and he's had a lot of death and grief in his life, and he's processed a lot of it. And I brought up this idea of like, things aren't happening to you, they're happening for you. And he was like, so you think that your mother dying, for an example, that didn't happen to you, that happened for you?
Right.
And I said, I have to believe that, because without my
Yeah.
mother's death, without the loss of Wayne and my mother back to back, I wouldn't be having these bigger ideas of what I want for myself, the message that I want coming out, this killing versus connecting, any of these.
Right.
I'd still just be doing high energy fucking character work and whatever for years, and I never would have progressed in a lot of ways.
It would have never meant anything.
Right.
It would have eventually not meant anything.
Right.
Right. Yeah. You wouldn't find the actual purpose in a way. I find a lot of purpose in helping other people heal and connect and all that. That feels so good to me, because that feeling of grief and death is so isolating. And you feel so alone, especially in the moments when it first happens. You can't wrap your head around that time is still happening, that people are still going to work, and there's concerts, and there's you're like, my mom just died. What do you mean you're going to go see fucking
How
Coldplay?
dare
Right.
you have a good
Right.
time? My mom's dead.
Exactly.
I,
You get stuck in that. So thank God that I get to help people in some way feel less of that isolation.
I think that's the narrative that I think people can take. Every situation that happens in your life is metaphorically a fork in the road. You can choose to deal with it this way or that way. It definitely is what you said. It happened for you. I've said millions of times when I've talked about my journey of cancer, people will say, man, that must have really been hard. That must have really sucked. That must have been terrible. And I will turn it around a lot of times and say, that was probably the best year of my life, because I found out how strong I was. I found out what I was capable of. I found out how touched I was by all the people that supported me, and how many lives I touched, and how many people put their faith in me. It was kind of hard to disappoint those people.
Yeah, it's a whole perspective shift.
It's a whole perspective shift. And
yeah,
we started off this podcast talking about my family and my family dynamic, and I can tell you, I love my family, but I can tell you that is not the narrative in my family. The narrative is always to look at the negative and to focus on the negative. It always has been. and you have to break that cycle.
That's exactly. But my family and my best friend and I joke all the time, whenever we call people from back home, it's commiserate. That's never, you can never, when he calls back home, talks to his mom, it's never like, hey mom, how are you? I'm great. It's always, hey mom, how are you? Well, the dishwasher's acting up and the dog.
Yes.
It's this
right.
negative, and it doesn't matter who I talk to back home, friends, family, whatever.
Yeah.
It's that's how we operate. It's commiserate, and you have to break that cycle.
Amen.
Well, and that makes me think of two things. One, the happening to you versus happening for you, especially when it comes to a death. It's so easy for me. Like I remember somebody saying, I'm sorry for your loss, I'm sorry that happened to you. And I go, no, it happened to them. They're dead. They died.
Right.
Didn't happen to me. Whatever ripple effect that happens, I might learn something from it or whatever, or feel something. But yeah, they're the ones that's dead. Nothing happened to me.
Yeah.
And the other thing is something that we talked about on here that I was talking to my therapist about yesterday, is expectations being the enemy of peace. It's something that I said one day, and right when I said it, I was like, oh my God. I was at a music festival helping out a friend at their booth, and it's a fucking music festival. There's hippies everywhere. You're relying on all these fucking hippies, and then half of them are on nitrous and fucking, and he's, well, I wish this and this. And I was go, dude, this is a music. You have got to just roll with the punches here. Like,
right.
Your peace of mind is going to be gone this whole weekend. Like, I'm here to have a good time, dude. Don't expect shit. Just and I've found that always worked. I always went by that without knowing it for so long. Like that's what I discovered with comedy shows, going to these fucking one-nighters in small towns. As soon as I stopped expecting anything, the shows became better.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I'm struggling with too. I deal a lot with that about expectations versus reality, and that's where a lot of my either anger or disappointment lies. And it's hard to let go, but once you learn how to let go of that, your life does get better.
Well, because everything feels like fucking injustice otherwise.
Yes.
Yeah.
It feels unjust, as if you got betrayed.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I fucking expected some shit I shouldn't have expected. I wouldn't feel this betrayal otherwise.
Yeah.
Right. And Bill will close it out with that. But we had conversations about it. What you said as far as that expectations was exactly what the first thing that I talked to my therapist about when I started going was I need to learn that not everybody does things the exact same way that I think they should do it. And when they don't, and they don't meet that expectation, I get angry or disappointed, or I feel slighted or whatever else. And I need to learn to manage those and realize that not everybody is the same as me. So, and it's a process. And I think a lot of men go through it.
Yeah.
Michael, where can people find you online? Where can they find some of your materials and things like that?
Everything is at Malone Comedy. So you can go to malonecomedy.com, or you can follow along with me on Instagram or Facebook at Malone Comedy. And like I said, I have a new series that's launching next month called Stand Up, Sit Down, and that'll all be on Malone Comedy. And my two specials, Laugh After Death and Wait and See, are both up on Amazon, or you can watch them on YouTube. And my book is on YouTube or on Amazon as well, and it's called Dead Serious.
Great. All right, Bill, you got anything to close out?
No, I'm just gonna think about fucking death apparently for the rest of the night.
Perfect. Then I've done my job.
All right, there we go.
Michael, I love you, brother. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, Michael, this was really nice. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad we connected, and I hope we stay in touch. So,
yes, great meeting you, Chris.
Thank you very much. All right, everybody, check out the rest of our podcasts on the network of Three Beards Media. We have all kinds of crazy content going, good stuff going, and with that, we are gonna say good night.